Out of the earth, bring that down a little bit, please. Because that's really loud. Yeah, were y'all awake? You awake now? You had coffee this morning yet? Can we bring my mic down, please? Out of the earth rises light, rises life, rises spring. May we join with the continuing miracle that is springtime and enter into life with lightness and joy. Out of the Spirit rises faith, rises hope, rises love. May we join with the miracle that is Easter time and enter into life with hope and love. Let us resurrect with the continuing resurrection of spring. Let us resurrect with the Spirit and enter into renewed life as we gather in our time of worship together this Easter, etc. morning. Come, let us worship. I'm also supposed to announce, Katya is now going to share beautiful song, Ukrainian prayer. Thanks, Katya.
Good morning, everyone. Here in the sanctuary and all of you at home. And welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Berkeley. I'm Karen Elliott, and I'll be your worship associate today, when our theme is Moments That Bring Awakening. This is a welcoming congregation, and we are always working on how to welcome and care for one another better. If this is your first time here watching or sitting in the sanctuary, we're so glad you've come. Whoever you are, we welcome you in the fullness of who you are. As we begin, we want to acknowledge that this church occupies land in Huichin, the unceded territory of the Chochenyo-speaking Ohlone people. We understand that we continue to benefit from the seizure and occupation of this land. We acknowledge and embrace our responsibility to take restorative action. We affirm that this is deeply felt, and we commit our congregation to be in right relationship with Indigenous communities, aligning in solidarity, supporting Indigenous projects, and caring properly for the land. So please take a moment to prepare yourself for our time together today. For those of you at home, you might get a candle so you can join the chalice lighting. As Reverend Michelle lights the chalice flame, let's kindle our own flames in our hearts along with her to these words by Dillman Baker Sorrells. For all holy days on which we recall the old stories, we light the flame. For Passover, which reminds us of the courage and strength of those seeking freedom in the past, we light the flame. For Easter, which reminds us that love is our greatest challenge, we light the flame. For gathering today in this sacred space, we light the flame. For the opportunity to be together in this community, as a community, to remember the past, to plan for our future, to be alive in our present. We also pause to remind ourselves of some of the foundations of resilience, which we need so badly. With Reverend Michelle this morning, we light a candle of courage, a candle of acts of service, a candle of fellowship, and a candle of hope. May we find and cultivate these foundations of resilience in ourselves and in one another. Continuing the theme of Easter in our songs together today, please join us in singing our opening song, "Lo, the Day of Days is Here." The words will be on screen, here and online, and in your hymnal.
Festival of hope and cheer.
please remain standing, or sit if you wish, to join me in saying our covenant. Love guides this church. The quest for truth and justice is its common purpose. To give thanks, listen deeply, speak with care, honor our differences, and seek and grant forgiveness. These things we covenant with one another.
We invite our young ones and our young at heart ones to come on down to the front for our story today, which is really a story for all ages. It's for all of us. Some of y'all are already down front. You're all good, but come on out here. Excellent. Young at heart, whoever wants to come up front for our story. Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Are you having a good Easter so far? Yeah? Did you get to meet the Easter Bunny this morning? No? Is she in here? She's not in here. Because the Easter Bunny's a girl, of course. Okay, at least I got a chuckle. I heard it kind of reverberate through the room. There we go. Awesome. All right. So, I've got a story to tell you today about a character from the Bible. Do you know who Mary Magdalene was? No? She's absolutely awesome. So, she was a first century Jewish woman who followed Jesus. She was actually named the first apostle, or the apostle to the apostles, because she was the absolute first one who told the Easter story. And you know what? The men didn't believe her. Silly men. So there are many, many legends about Mary Magdalene. Just like so many other legends and myths and stories, the truth may not be dependent on historical fact, although many of y'all are going to question that. Yeah. Oh, I know you will. It's about the eternal truth in the story. This is a wisdom story. This is one that we just enjoy because it's an awesome story, right? So it doesn't matter whether it actually happened. The truth is true. If its truth is true enough to make us tell the story again, and that's all that matters. We're going to be telling other stories today that are that same thing, so just stay with me. So legend has it that Mary Magdalene staged a protest in the court of Caesar in Rome. As the story goes, she was a woman of means and influence and chutzpah, so she had some oomph to her. And sometime soon after the crucifixion of Jesus, after he was killed, she procured an invitation to dine at the court of Caesar. So this is like in front of the king. She had a mission, though. She went to Rome to protest the not justice that had happened in how Jesus was killed, and to announce the resurrection. So as the ancient tale says, that as Magdalene stood up to speak, Caesar was about to peel a hard-boiled egg. Too many eggs today. Yes?
You have an egg in your hand.
I have an egg in my hand. I do.
It's an Easter egg.
It's an Easter egg?
Wait, is it a real egg?
It is not a real egg. Because I was worried about dropping it. So it's a wooden egg. But okay, it's an egg. It's a prop, right? Okay. So when he heard her announcement of the resurrection, he held up this egg and said, Jesus can no more be raised from the dead than this egg can turn red. And there in his hand, the egg turned red. Now, mine can't turn red because of apparently paint drying time and props that wait until the last minute. So my magic trick won't really work today because I would have red paint everywhere. Because y'all know I would just switch it out in my pocket to pretend it turned red, right? But the paint's too wet, so we're going to pretend it turned red. But the thing is, as the story goes, there the egg in Caesar's hand turned red while he was holding it. Now, it may not be a historical story, but it does account for the Eastern Orthodox icons of Mary Magdalene holding a red egg. Y'all ever notice that? She's holding a red egg in the pictures. And it's also the color that Eastern Christians dye their Easter eggs, as a reminder that their God can always do something entirely unexpected and miraculous. Pretty cool story, eh? Imagine if Easter preachers and all the rest of us had the chutzpah, the oomph of Mary Magdalene. That would be as unexpected as Mary's red egg. So maybe next year we'll all remember to dye some Easter eggs red, right? Yeah. You dyed your Easter eggs at your school? Okay, who dyed real eggs for today? Oh, goodness. So there's not going to be that much egg salad leftovers for the next weeks. All right. Well, that's our story for today. You all are staying in the service today. We've got fabulous music, and I've got a few more stories you're going to hear later. They might even be a little bit funny. All right, so why don't you go on back with your families, or you can hang out up here at the front to play with stuff. And, of course, you got all your little toys and the Easter eggs. So this is an all-ages service today, so we get our little ones in the service too. And I see our Easter bunny, he's de-bunnied, or I would try to bring her up and embarrass her a little bit. All right. Now we're going to have some fabulous music and then go on with the service. I'd now like to invite us into a time of grounding as we hold the hurting places in our hearts, down in our bellies, in our beings, as we join in our collective lament for peace and a lament about the violence playing out in our world. I invite you to close your eyes if you wish. Feel yourself sitting. If you're sitting, the seat behind your back, the seat underneath you, the ground under your feet. Feel through your feet, through the ground, this beautiful corkwood floor, down into the earth. Reaching down into her embrace, also holding, tenderly holding the lament and the reach of our compassion. I invite you to take a nice few deep breaths, breathing them in, holding them for a moment, and releasing them. And again, in and hold and release, letting the life flow through you. The love flow through you. Now, in the spirit of prayer, spirit of life and love, justice and peace, day in and day out weigh weary tasks, burdens we lift again, worn paths we wear some more, want and means worn thin and fatigue, pain and grief, coldness in our heart, bitter and weary days, perhaps. Where we know desolation, how do we call forth hope? When our hearts buried, sunken, how do we dig out and rise up? What healing touch do we long for? What balm might we take and share? Come what may, O Spirit of life, may we keep a ray of light for our inward path, a living water in the depths of us, a cleansing breath. May we keep them both for ourselves and to share. May we call forth from each other vitality, tenacity, resilience. May love rest in us, and may justice live through us. May we have the touch to call others back to life and love, to justice, and so much to peace. May we sing songs and add the alleluias in the Spirit, by the Spirit, with the Spirit-giving power. May it be. Amen. And now let us join in singing the song, Amazing Grace. You know what? Let's go ahead and stand for it, and the words will be on screen. Amazing Grace.
Amazing grace, how sweet the
The Duck of Enlightenment by Kathleen McTeague. One spring afternoon, I went home a little early so I could claim an hour of study time before my children got home. As I opened the door, I was greeted by both cats, which was a little odd because they don't usually condescend to notice our coming and going unless it's dinner time. One of them promptly bolted out the open door, while the other wrapped himself persistently around my legs. As I stood puzzling over this behavior, at the edge of my vision, I caught a sudden motion in the family room, where there should be no motion at all in the empty house. With the hair rising on the back of my neck, I slowly moved into the house and rounded the corner of the room. And then I saw it. There was a duck in the middle of the room. A wild brown duck. A live duck in the family room. My brain actually stopped completely for a couple of heartbeats. What should the brain do, after all, with so utterly unexpected a sight? I stood there in the doorway and said out loud, "There is a duck in the family room," as though it would help me believe it. None of the windows were open. The doors were properly closed. The duck, now huddled in the far corner of the room, next to a clutter of books and DVDs, radiating the hope that if she now kept perfectly still, I wouldn't see her. Carefully, I caught her up. A small wood duck, female, her heart tapping frantically in my hands, and I carried her outside. I looked at her, full of wonder for this little visitation. Then I opened my hands. She leapt into the air in a great arc of liberation and beat her wings in a straight line of escape all the way to the horizon. I went back inside to investigate the breach of household security. And within a few minutes, the mystery was explained. A trail of ashes spilled from the fireplace. And here and there on the wall and against the ceiling, I saw soot in little feather-shaped impressions where the duck had thrown herself up toward the light. It all made sense then, how a duck could come to be standing in the middle of my house. But I felt lucky that for the space of a few breaths, my linear deductive mind had been shocked into silence. When something tumbles us into that state of wonder, the unexpected quiet in our heads is like a window flung open on the world. Instead of the routine, predictable story we live each day, there is something new under the sun. Surprised out of our minds for a moment, we actually see. Startled awake, we receive what's in front of us. Simple, astonishing, unedited. Afterward, basking in the dazzlement of my visitor, it occurred to me that it really shouldn't require a duck in the family room to awaken my wonder. Isn't the same lovely little wood duck just as wondrous, just as worthy of my awe and my open and grateful heart when she is out in the woods where she belongs? The real miracle is not that her frightened heart beat against my hands for a moment, but that her heart beats at all. That her heart beats, that my hands can hold, that my eyes can see.
And yes, I'm going to wear the ears for the entire service, in case you were wondering. Did you know that April is a very holiday-filled time of the year? December's got nothing on it, at least as far as religious holidays go. It's the new year for a number of folks. It's the Hindu New Year, celebrated this month. The Buddhist Theravada New Year started yesterday. Both are tied to the lunar calendar, so they do move around a bit. A couple of other major religious holidays also tied to the lunar calendar: the Muslim lunar month of Ramadan, which is one of the 5 pillars of Islam, where all who can, in a healthy manner, fast during daylight hours. The other is the Jewish holiday of Passover, which began this past Friday evening. That's the remembrance of the Hebrew people's deliverance from slavery in Egypt. And the Christian holiday of Easter, another major religious holiday, and that's today, with Palm Sunday and Good Friday being in the past week. And also, many of these, along with some others, it's the first time in 30 years that they have all converged. Vaisakhi, the Sikh holiday, Mahavir Jayanti, the Baha'i holiday, and the Gathering of Nations of the indigenous peoples in our country. And then, of course, the pagan holiday Ostara. Despite the fact that Ostaran traditions have been co-opted all over Easter, is Ostaran actually a word? Let's call it a word. Ostara was in March, and Beltane is coming up the 1st of May, and they're 2 of the 8 major holidays of the pagan year. So, lots of different holidays for a number of widely followed religious traditions. And all of them have such great stories in them, too. Stories are the basis for so many things: origin stories in religions, and later turning points or transitions, too, for communities, for institutions. They remind me of a particular term in photography: the decisive moment. It was popularized by French photojournalist and street photographer Henri Cartier-Bresson. The decisive moment is essentially the it moment, the moment when the spirit of the subject or the scene just comes together and happens. A fraction of a moment before or after it might be boring, but that it moment, the decisive moment. Thinking about stories and things that happen that make good stories, there's a decisive moment in each of those too. A moment that's a turning point, or that's some sort of awakening or insight for the folks in the story. And since this month's theme is awakening, it makes for a good way to look at some core stories for some different religious traditions, particularly related to the holidays happening right now. So let's first talk Easter. Then we'll talk Moses and the Buddha and the Prophet Muhammad as well. So Easter is perhaps the central story for Christians. the story of Jesus' death and resurrection. Now, okay, as we talked about earlier, I know that once science and rationality are applied, there are some different opinions on the factualness of parts of these stories. But when you're talking about core stories and their power, frankly, whether they're factually accurate or not isn't the point and isn't really even worth debating about. Okay, this is also coming from a scientific, rational person, but that's the power of stories. So the Easter story, which is also called the Passion story, it's a story about the end of Jesus' teaching and activism campaign and his execution and resurrection. To start, though, we need some context. What do y'all think? So usually the Passion story is told from the fourth gospel, the one often known as John, although fun fact, no one knows who actually wrote it. The names of those were just given for convenience. To be technically accurate, we just call it the fourth gospel. So let's do some review. Let's read that book together. What do y'all think? Yeah? Y'all know how long it actually is? Okay, so let's go a little bit more modern. How about let's do it Twitter style, 140 characters or less? Okay, this is called the Twibble. Someone actually took and rewrote the Bible with each chapter in 140 characters or less. All right, but to warm you up, let me share the Sermon on the Mount, the 3 books in the first gospel, often known as Matthew, that are one of the most beautiful pieces of oration ever, among those. Okay, so they're in 140 characters or less times 3 chapters. Y'all ready? Okay, Sermon on the Mount, a little bit of review on Jesus. By the way, he's called JC because it's fewer characters. Chapter 5. JC's greatest hits include Beatitudes, you are salt, and don't even think about adultery, you've already committed it. Chapter 6. Don't store up your treasures on earth. Get a safety deposit box in heaven and put your heart in it, metaphorically speaking. In chapter 7, dear judgmental hypocrite, you probably haven't noticed there's a big honking plank in your eye. You might want to remove it. Did I mention it's a comedian who did this? All right, so let's review book of the fourth gospel, often known as the book of John. I think it's got 21 chapters, but 140 characters or less per chapter. Okay, y'all ready? No manger story, no wise men. The word was G, and the word was with G. Great. We're only in the beginning, and it's already incomprehensible. Chapter 2. JC starts his ministry by turning water into wine, forever silencing all those who would dismiss his followers as killjoys. And by the way, here's a picture of JC holding out a couple bottles and saying, open bar, folks. Chapter 3. Jesus so loved the world that he sent his only son to save the world, not just you and the people you like. Okay, rant over. Chapter 4. JC promises a woman she'll never thirst again if she drinks his living water. It has more electrolytes than Gatorade. Patent pending. Chapter 5. JC orders a paralytic to get up and walk. Hey, this approach could save our healthcare crisis. Just tell folks not to get sick. Chapter 6. Taste of Galilee is a hit when JC feeds 5,000 people with 5 loaves and 2 fish. Could he also multiply chocolate cake, please? Chapter 7. JC's brothers urge him to attend a festival to show off all his miracles and get all famous, but that's not just his style. He's on the QT. Chapter 8. DVD release of John contains a deleted scene that wasn't in the original gospel. JC saving a woman caught in adultery. Love that scene. Chapter 9, JC uses his own saliva to heal a man born blind, so the first thing the guy sees is a stranger spitting on him. Hello, cruel world. Chapter 10, JC says he is the good shepherd who lays down his life for the sheep. The bad shepherd just eats the sheep. Mutton. Chapter 11, the only NT example of JC crying is when his pal Lazarus dies. He also cries when the Reds lose, but it's not recorded in the Bible. Chapter 12. Since JC can raise folks from the tomb, the Pharisees, want to send him to a tube. It's the law of conservation of dead people. Chapter 13. The 12 freak out when JC wants to wash their feet, but at least he doesn't use his own spit this time. That's progress. 14. JC says he's the way to the Father, but it's all a bit vague. Doubting Tom, Lord, we have no GPS. How do we find him? Chapter 15. JC, love one another as I have loved you. It's not really too much to ask, just be willing to die for others. Oh, there's that. Chapter 16. G, you haven't asked for squat, ask and you shall receive. So now can I have a pony? I've been begging you ever since Psalm 5. Chapter 17. JC prays all his followers will have unity and harmony. This prayer will be answered at such time as hell freezes over. Chapter 18. A posse of soldiers, priests, and random cowboy extras come to arrest JC, who prefers to go quietly despite Pete's sword-blazing tactics. Chapter 19. Even while dying on a cross, JC makes arrangements for his mom to go live with John. That's a good Jewish son there. Chapter 20. Doubting Tom mauls JC's wounds to make sure his resurrection's the real deal. JC, ouch, couldn't you just take my word for it? That hurt. And last, chapter 21. JC to Pete, do you love me with agape love? Pete, sure, I friended you 3 times on Facebook. JC, fair enough. Go, feed my lambs. Shelves. I don't have shelves here. Okay, you're now totally up to speed, right? That totally made sense. Of course it did. So the story of the culmination of Jesus' career, which was those last couple of 140-word tweets, of the growing antagonism between him and the established powers, which really he'd been readily criticizing and challenging a lot. One of my favorite stories is when he goes into the temple and there's everybody selling all this stuff. Let me sell you this stuff to sacrifice it. And he goes and overturns all the tables. He was really quite a radical. And then after a Last Supper, which by the way was not a Passover Seder, even though some folks say it was, he's betrayed by one of his core disciples, then tried and executed, of course arranging care for his mother while in the process. 3 days later, comes back from the dead, and I admit I don't quite have the guts to do a zombie theme for Easter, but I have been tempted to many a year. Maybe someday, maybe next year, maybe I still might not have the guts for it. This story is the one that the followers of Jesus, starting with Mary Magdalene, carried and established congregations and followers based on. A story of love and sacrifice that they shared. It is a story of awakening for Christians, the story of the awakening of their faith tradition, and one revisited at this time every year during what they call Holy Week. And if you liked the Twibble or Twible, which one? I'll go with Twibble. But Twibble, Twible, if you like that version of Jesus' story, I might also recommend some other fantastic cinematic renditions like Jesus Christ Superstar, or the Monty Python version, Life of Brian. Fabulous watches. Now, speaking of cinematic renditions, the 10 Commandments with Charlton Heston is something I grew up with. We're jump shifting to another tradition now. And it gets to a couple of the core stories, decisive moments in the Jewish tradition, centered around Moses, played, of course, by Charlton Heston. First, you have the moment of awakening that Moses himself goes through, that of the burning bush. He started out through a whole turn of events and a floating baby bed in the river, being raised as a prince, and after killing one of the Egyptian overseers who was abusing one of his fellow Hebrews, he took off into the desert for fear of his life. But he was after a calm, boring, life-filled life, but instead, that wasn't meant to be. As he stumbles onto a randomly, mysteriously burning bush one day, through which the voice of the Hebrew God directs him to do otherwise. Now, I'm particularly fond of this bush. I actually wrote an entire academic length paper on not just the story, but really about the word for bush, sineh, in Hebrew. And it's usually translated as bush, but it actually has no translation. And it literally only appears in this one place in the entire Hebrew Bible, and in one other place that's just referencing back to this place. That's pretty cool, eh? Okay, now you learned something else today. So after the burning sineh, he employs his brother Aaron, who's frankly a better administrator than he is, and sets out to free the Hebrew people. And this gets us to one of the core stories in Judaism, one that is being celebrated right now, the story of Passover. Okay, you want to hear that one from the Twibble? Okay. All right, this is in the book of Exodus. All right. Starting at chapter 5. Bipolar G, and by the way, G is shortened for God because that's just 2 extra characters we can't have. Bipolar G recovers from manic episode to help Moses, present iconic "Let my people go" speech to hard-hearted Pharaoh, but epic fail. Chapter 6, we interrupt this story to bring you Mo and Aaron's Hebrew creds. Also, G claims to have a viable exit strategy from Egypt. Chapter 7, G gets serious. Now we're getting into the plagues, turning the Nile and all water to blood. But God also gives Pharaoh ODD, oppositional defiance disorder, so he won't budge. Talk about cross purposes. Chapter 8, frogs and gnats and flies, oh my. Phar promises to let the Hebes have a few days off. Hebrews, that's right, I don't like that other word. I'll give a few more characters. Phar promises to let the Hebrews have a few days off, but then reneges. Horrible bosses episode indeed. Chapter 9. Pestilence, boils, and hail. G's not playing around with wee gnats anymore. But why does G harden Phar's heart? Why not end it now? Chapter 10. G tells Mo he's made Phar obstinate, so there'll be a more dramatic Seder for the grandkids later. There's always that explanation. 11. Phar, don't say you weren't warned. All firstborn sons in Egypt will be toast unless you finally give up, which, spoiler, he doesn't. And G debuts cooking show with only unleavened ingredients. Hebrew viewers follow tips and save their firstborns, but the Egyptians don't have cable, hence the Passover. It's the story of the plagues that the Egyptian people are subjected to as Pharaoh goes back and forth, and then finally after the last plague, when the firstborn children of the Egyptians die while the children of the Hebrew people are passed over, finally lets them go. This is the story that Jews remember during the time of the holiday of Passover each year. The story of how the Hebrew people are freed from slavery in Egypt. And also a deeply meaningful story to the African American slaves in our country as they were seeking to escape slavery as well. Another classic story, shall we continue to do the religious hopping as Unitarians? Buddhism, another classic story of awakening, that of Siddhartha Gautama. First, the threefold story of the first part of his own awakening, when he ventures from the protective cushy palace and sees old age, sickness, and death for the first time. Then he renounces his life of luxury and leaves home seeking enlightenment. That brings us to the other part of the awakening story, when he sits down under the Bodhi tree and resolves to not get up until achieving enlightenment, which of course he does. It is his moment of awakening. And then he sets out to help others achieve awakening and enlightenment too. Bodhi Day is the celebration of this awakening moment, although it's not as popularly celebrated as Vesak Day, on which the birth, enlightenment, and death of the Buddha are honored. And that's happening next month. Like I said, convergence of all sorts of holidays and awakening stories. And yet there's another major holiday, of all the major holidays going on too, one of the 5 pillars of Islam, Ramadan, the month of daytime fasting for all Muslims who are able. Islam has a fabulous awakening story too, where the words of the Quran are spoken to the Prophet Muhammad by his God, whom Muslims know as Allah. There are 5 pillars of Islam, 5 religious mandates for Muslims to follow, including daily prayer, annually fasting for Ramadan, and then the once-in-a-lifetime making a pilgrimage to Mecca. Core stories, these decisive moments, awakening moments, can be found in most religious traditions, and plenty of other origin stories too. Moments of awakening or some life-changing insight are found in each of our own lives as well. I remember one group I was working with asked me to define spirituality for them. You ever asked for that? Of course. And I, spouted some word-based definitions, which, by the way, they were completely unsatisfied with. So I came up with a different way of answering their question. I asked them to think about their own decisive moments, life events that were life-changing or life-deepening for them. And after we went around and shared about many of these, I asked them if they had found their definition of spirituality. They were satisfied with that answer. We have our moments of awakening, these turning points or origin stories in our lives. We have those stories in our congregations and our communities as well. And we have them on a world scale too. I sincerely hope we are not seeing that far-reaching of a story playing out right now in Ukraine, although it is certainly a decisive moment for the Ukrainian people. But there really is no way to know. Every day and every week, I am further horrified by what we are hearing about Russia's continued actions. We've added the Ukrainian flag to our chancel in outrage for what's happening there and solidarity for the people of Ukraine. And I intend to leave it up for the duration of however long we stand with them. There are no easy answers or solutions right now. I don't have any inspiring words of comfort to say, because there are just a lot of feelings folks are having right now. It is saddening and angering and despairing and so many other things. Let us just hang in there, do what we can, and not take our eyes away. Moments of awakening, moments of enlightenment and insight, the decisive moments that define our times and our lives. Not only do these make the best stories, but they also form touchstones that we can return to again and again. Let us hold on to them for the insight that they have and the foundations that they bring us as we journey through this often crazy and unknown world together. May it be so.
With our offering, each of us has the opportunity to recommit to making UUCB a strong and vibrant community. At this point in our service, we invite you to make an offering. During the next 2 weeks, we are concluding our pledge campaign for the coming year. If you have not yet made your pledge, please do so soon if you can, so that we can put our best foot forward when presenting next year's budget to the board in May. And thank you for that. For the time being, we're conducting our offering in the sanctuary without passing the plate. Instead, you can either give electronically, or you can take a donation envelope from the back of the pew in front of you and place it with your donation into the donation box, which sits beside the fountain in the atrium. There are several ways to give electronically. If you look at the back of your name tag, there's a QR code and a web address there that will take you to our giving page, and also a number that can be used for a text to give. For you at home, directions for giving will appear on the screen. And for everyone, please indicate pledge or plate. For in addition to our pledges, which are so needed, we support our wonderful Good Neighbor organizations through our plate offerings. Each week, half our plate offering is shared with a Good Neighbor organization recommended by our Social Justice Council that needs our financial support. We're grateful that you've continued to support them generously through these very hard times. For April, our Good Neighbor is Yes, Nature to Neighborhoods. In partnership with nature, Yes nurtures leaders who champion the well-being of the community. Their vision is for Richmond youth, adults, and families to lead healthy, connected lives, to motivate change in their neighborhoods, and to inspire a safe, thriving community. You saw a video a couple of weeks ago. Offerings of any value are always received with gratitude. Thank you. And now, here's our offertory, Easter Parade by Irving Berlin. Please join me in dedicating our offering. We dedicate our offering and ourselves to the mission of this congregation, to create loving community, inspire spiritual growth, and encourage lives of integrity, joy, and service.
I'm a mess. There we go. All right, that's better. Can you hear me? Yeah, we're getting there. Okay. Thank you so much for being here today. Y'all ready for your favorite part of the service, the announcements? Yes! I really want to give a huge shout out and thank you to all who made our egg hunt possible today. The kids had so much fun with it, and I saw the little ones running around out here. The bigger than 6 and up ones were down here. Alice was dressed up as our fabulous Easter bunny for the day. So thank you all, and Michael Armstrong and the other youth leaders and the members of our youth group who made it all happen. So thank you so much. Yes. Next week after the service, so next Sunday after the service, afterwards will be the third of our town hall information sessions about the information packet recently sent out about the church's Freestone Retreat property in Sonoma County. So I hope that if you haven't made one of those info times yet, that you'll be able to stay after the service next week. It'll also be live streamed on Facebook and YouTube, so you can catch it virtually. There will be, as many of you may have discovered, in-person coffee today. Woohoo! And there'll be an online coffee hour hosted as well if you are joining us virtually. And then the warning that I am so irritated to have to constantly give, there are those who would try to trick us into giving money away either online or email or through text messages. So this is called phishing, which is spelled with a PH, phishing. Folks who pretend to be other people, folks who are faking my name and email address, for instance. Watch out for them. I would never email you that way or text you that way asking for, get a hold of me quick, I need your help. I wouldn't do that. Those are phishers who are trying to trick you into responding back and then giving them money. Another one went out via text message to many of our members yesterday, so just be on alert for those. I can't help it, they're getting the email addresses and phone numbers from elsewhere, and it's very hard to stop them from doing so. So we have to be vigilant ourselves. And then last, I thought I would take a moment to once again remind us of what our fabulous name tag color lanyards mean. And we are out of green right now, so if you were looking for a green, they're on order, so you'll be able to grab one soon. So you'll see that there are folks wearing different lanyard colors. Karen, do you have your lanyard right now? Can you come out and model? Thank you. All right, name tags. So we've got a system now where name tags are going on to lanyards. And the red one means, I'm happy to see you, but I'm being careful. Please stay 6 feet, 6 feet away. The yellow one means, I'm okay with closer proximity, but not hugs or other touch right now. And the green one means I'm okay with hugs, but please ask first. So this is our way of being able to talk about and show consent for both proximity and touch here in our church. OWL for the whole church. It's fabulous. All right, now let us join for one more Easter hymn. What do y'all think? This one is very, very Easter. Jesus Christ is risen today. The words will be on screen. Please rise in body or in spirit. those who celebrate the resurrection of Jesus, may this day be another affirmation of divine love and promise. For all those who see the eternal story of new spring and life beginning, may you breathe deeply of a season of promise and hope. For all who may be experiencing despair or hopelessness this time, may you find in the darkness or depression a doorway and warmth that offers you freedom. For all of us, together we can do what no isolated person can manage. Rolling the heavy stone aside reminds us we are far more powerful together than on our own. From this time of worship, may you go with hope, with courage, with connection, and with love. And remember, you are never all alone. Blessed be.